I'm not unfamiliar with doing top 10 lists. They're always provocative and they lead to an interesting, if not often annoying conversation. But I haven't ever predicted who the top 10 players will be going into the season. So in today's video, I thought that I would mix it up a bit by trying to predict the 10 best players of the 2025-26 season. Let's get into it. Hello everybody, welcome to Rusty Bucket. Subscribe to the channel and drop a like on this video, and check us out over on Spotify and Apple Podcasts if you would like to enjoy this as an audio-only experience. I do want to make a couple of disclaimers here. Obviously, by the nature of this being predictions, there's going to be shit that just ends up being wrong. There are injury factors, and there are a couple of players who are lower on this list because of injury risk and things like that. Obviously, we're not going to be seeing Tyrese Halliburton or Jason Tatum, so it's explicitly players who will play in this next upcoming year. And sometimes the places between the rankings one above the other doesn't matter that much. It's pretty close. Other times they do. I will try to clarify that when it comes up. With that said, I'm going to start with some honorable mentions. People who did not quite crack the top 10 but are deserving of at least discussing the possibility of them doing that, because everyone that I have listed is good enough that they could be a top 10 player next year. And I've got 17 names here. I could have gone even longer, but at a certain point, I'm not creating a top 20 list. At 17, 16, and 15, I have Ja Morant, Anthony Davis, and Cade Cunningham. Ja played a lot better to close the year when he was given more of the keys to the offense. The Grizzlies' end of the season was not all that amazing, but I still do believe in Ja Morant, and it's been quite a while since he's been able to have just a full season. And if that is allowed, on top of the fact that I think the Grizzlies should be pretty good next year, it would not surprise me if Ja was, on the cusp of getting in these top 10 conversations. Anthony Davis, not the best towards the tail end. In his Mavericks years, he was kind of like a god for the first half in a Mavericks jersey, and since then he was fine. He's going to have the biggest role that he has had basically since he was on the New Orleans Pelicans in this upcoming season. I just don't really believe in him as an offensive lead option anymore, especially with somewhat minimal playmaking on his team, at the very least suboptimal playmaking on his team. I could see him being one of the best defensive players in the entire league and then a good offensive player, but for him to be a top 10 guy, I don't know. I just don't believe that Anthony Davis has that in him. I would be very happy to be wrong. It'll be very interesting to see, but as of now, I don't buy it. Cade Cunningham, I could see him leaping into the top 10. In fact, I probably would have predicted that had the playoffs not gone the way that they did against the New York Knicks. Now, he did adapt better as it went along, and a lot of his poor play was a product of the circumstances, just the roster around him not being all that amazing. Malik Beasley and Tim Hardaway Jr. being extremely inconsistent and unreliable as three-point shooters. Tobias Harris being his second option. The Knicks also just playing really, really good defense in the postseason, able to throw big wings at him. It was a lot of stuff working against him, but I still felt like there was a lack of composure there, and I was ready to usher him into that superstar territory if he played a better series, but he did not. So I think it'll probably take another year for him to get into that conversation, but I wouldn't be shocked if he jumped up into it this next year. I am a big believer in the Detroit Pistons. I think the Pistons could have a damn good record next year. Next up, the next three spots, 14, 13, and 12, I have Paolo Banchero, Donovan Mitchell, Zion Williamson, and I'll just say number 11 as well, I have Joel Embiid. Now, Paulo, I think could, again, a similar place that I have with Cade, where I'm like, if this guy's top 10, if it's his year right now, wouldn't shock me at all, but I do think it will be one more year before he is up in that top 10 category, though I do think he will get there. Donovan Mitchell, Donovan's kind of a hard player to rank because he is known for elevating his game in the playoffs, sometimes a little bit generously known for that because it's not like he does it every single time, but he was pretty damn good this last postseason when basically everything was falling apart around him. And he also had a massively reduced offensive role throughout the regular season to the point where his numbers look pretty pedestrian relative to what he's capable of. Makes him kind of hard to rank for that reason. So again, not really confident that he would not be in that top 10. And I also could see him being as low as 20 in terms of at least regular season ranking. But for the most part, this is factoring in playoff ability. If I believe you're a huge playoff underperformer, you're going to get ranked a little bit lower, as Cade was for underperforming a little bit. Again, I think his circumstances were rough and it was his first time in the playoffs, so it's completely understandable. But I'm using what I have available to me now to predict next year. Zion and Joel Embiid. These are dudes who it is entirely dependent on injury stuff, because if Joel Embiid, if you told me he was going to be healthy for the entire year, well, then I would say he is fourth or fifth on this list. However, I'm not going to make that bet. It seems like a dangerous bet to make. And with Zion Williamson, it's a similar thing. When he was playing last year, he kind of looked like what we have been hoping Zion would be for all this time. He was in the best shape that he ever was. He was putting up more points per minute than at any other point in his career on incredible efficiency. He took further strides as a playmaker. I think he can be in the top 10. The other interesting thing, when you look at his games played, he does 30, then 60, then 30, then 60, then 30. He has gone back and forth in that pattern. Last year, he played like 30-ish games. Maybe he'll play 60-ish next year based on that pattern. He was also in really good shape to end the year. Hopefully that translated through the playoffs and into the offseason, and he will enter the next season in good shape. Don't know, though, and injuries are still always a risk with him, even if he is in the most optimal shape, but we shall see. Joel Embiid, though, he is the biggest wild card in this entire thing. He could be, I would even say he could be as high as 3, dependent on what level of health he has, but I'm unwilling to bet that he's going to. So with that said, honorable mentions out of the way, let's get into this top 10. The first 3 names I have in my top 10 are Kevin Durant at 10, Steph Curry at 9, and Anthony Edwards at 8. Steph is another one who is kind of hard for me to rank, and of course I am a notorious Kevin Durant hater, but I feel like Kevin Durant has been kind of teetering on top 10 for the last couple of years. Honestly, I probably would have put him outside of my top 10 last year, and at least top 10 seasons that people had in general, including the postseason. Obviously, he didn't get to play in the postseason, so that's against him. But KD, I did think was on the cusp of it, but I think he will more definitively be in that top 10 because of the Houston Rockets and the fact that he is going to be playing probably the best basketball that he has since Golden State, at least in terms of like his most optimal winning situation. You could argue the Brooklyn Nets at one point, but like there was such a slim window where anybody was actually healthy and the team was actually together. Like I think Harden, Kyrie, and KD only played like 9-10 games in total together. So I think the Houston Rockets should be the most winning situation he has had to this point in his career. And I don't expect him to put up drastically different numbers, but what's different about what he would be doing versus Phoenix is it's more optimal. He is doing less of what he is bad at and more of what he is good at. I won't even say bad at, just stuff that it's not like what he should be putting his energy and effort into, because when you have a player who's as old as Kevin Durant, you don't want to overburden them with too much usage and too much responsibility. And for his last 2 years on the Phoenix Suns, he has had too much playmaking responsibility and far, far, far too much defensive responsibility, basically being the best defender on the fucking Suns throughout his tenure there, which is not good, especially for an older Kevin Durant. So I do feel confident KD will be in the top 10. I'm honestly not as confident about Steph. In fact, I think I'm going to swap them. I'm going to swap Steph and KD. I am a big believer that Steph is better than KD generally. I have him higher all time. I believe he was the better player when they were on the Warriors together. But Steph Curry last year was kind of a mixed bag. Now, part of that is that he just isn't the shot creator that he was because he's just much slower than he was. And he also has just been asked to do way too much creation in the last year, especially before the Jimmy Butler trade. Now, when the Jimmy Butler trade happened, he then proceeded to put up pretty similar numbers to what you expect from Steph, but I wouldn't exactly say he was peak Steph by that point. So because he spent more of the year than not playing pretty bad for what you know Steph to be, and the latter half of it was a much shorter sample size. I feel like there's a decent chance that Steph Curry does not end up being a top 10 player in this upcoming season. And, he's like 37 years old. That is natural. That is fair. I think Kevin Durant is less likely to decline. I don't know. It's kind of a hard game to play, though. So it could go either way with those old ass dudes. Anthony Edwards, I feel like we're waiting. We're waiting for the like top 5 player Anthony Edwards arc, and I'm beginning to wonder if we're ever actually going to get there. Now, he did take a substantial leap as a playmaker this previous season, but I do think he probably leaned on 3-point shooting a little bit too much. I think his regular season shooting wise was like definitely better and less reflective of how good he actually is. Not that he's not a great 3-point shooter, because you don't put up those kind of numbers throughout the course of a full season without that being the case. But we saw when his jump shot was not really working for him in the Thunder series, it got pretty ugly at points, and he also really struggled to get to the rim. Again, circumstances. The Thunder are the best fucking defense in the world and the best defense of the 2020s so far. And the situation with Minnesota, the spacing could get quite poor. Julius Randle also was starting to fail him as well towards the very end there. So I don't know. I think Anthony Edwards can jump higher than number 8, but this is where I feel comfortable putting him right now. Number 7 and number 6, I have Jalen Brunson and Devin Booker. Jalen Brunson is one where I don't know that he would be that highly ranked in the regular season. His numbers in the regular season are not that amazing. They're still good, but they're not the best of the best by any means. Probably not top 7 statistically in terms of like most impressive overall box scores. However, he is so fucking great in the playoffs that I think by the time we're at the season's end, no matter, assuming that the Knicks at the very least have like a long second round, I think that alone will put him into the top 10 players overall for that season. He is getting more of a boost for the playoffs than anybody else on this list, just purely because he really does elevate to a next level. In fact, let me just real quick be sure what those numbers are specifically. So yeah, 26 points per game in the regular season on 60% true shooting. Well, actually, it was only 29.4, so it's a 3.4 point difference. It's actually not that crazy. I'm not sure what's the advanced difference. 2% dip in true shooting. That's reasonable enough. 32 per game the year before that. Like, he's still elevating his game like crazy. The 23 season, he jumped it by 3.5 points per game. So yeah, I'm giving him that boost, and I realize maybe a little hypocritical to give that to him and not Donovan Mitchell, but Donovan Mitchell, I think, has been less consistently able to elevate as Jalen Brunson is. I don't think by a significant margin, but I don't know. Devin Booker, I have at number 6 because I think he is going to have a monster season. I do think the Phoenix Suns have enough. They have a well enough rounded roster to be a play-in tier team. I would be shocked if the Suns could be a 6 seed or above, but like 8, 9, 10 seed, I could absolutely see that. And the only way they're going to do that is if Devin Booker just has a fucking crazy season. So presumably, if he does that and they're a play-in level team and he's dragging his team to a playoff spot through a difficult-ass Western Conference, putting up like 30 points per game, I think that gets you very high into the top 10 player conversations. And I think this will be the year. This is like, for Devin Booker, I think this is his like 2006 Kobe year, where it's just like, dude, team's ass. You're the only star here. Put up a bunch of shots and hopefully it's enough. And I think for that reason, the elevated role will in turn elevate his ranking in the league. And I am personally a believer that he will put up those numbers without like some dramatic dip in efficiency, like not just on some purely shot chucking shit. I think Devin Booker will be very, very, very good because the Phoenix Suns need him to be. Now we get into the top 5 through 3. I think can be a bit of a mixed bag, and even 5 through 2 possibly. It depends how you feel about Giannis, but at 5, I have Victor Wembanyama. I believe a lot in Victor Wembanyama. I think a lot of the concerns that people have about him beyond injury stuff, but just literally what he's capable of doing on a basketball floor, I think is dramatically overblown. I think people care about the weaknesses in his game far more than they need to. They make mountains out of molehills, like especially the 3-point shooting stuff. Like, I promise you, Victor Wembanyama is not going to take his 7'6" frame and spend his entire 20 year long career not using it on the offensive end and just throwing up a bunch of dumb threes. The reason he took a shitload of threes last season was for the sake of reps. Not saying he's not going to take like 6 3-pointers a game at his peak, but like, he was bordering on 10 for a good portion of this year, and I don't expect him to be near that at his absolute best. It was just a way to see what kind of shots he could take and to make the defense respect him, because you know what? The defense does respect him. And if you have to close out on a 7'6" guy who can also get to the rim in 2 strides, can do a fucking Euro step when he puts one dribble inside of the 3-point line, that is daunting. That is terrifying. And he has not been in an optimized system at all. He is going to have some of the best playmaking, not even some of the best playmaking of his career between De'Aaron Fox, Dylan Harper, and Stephon Castle. There's going to be a good playmaker on the floor. There's going to be a good point guard on the floor at all times to set him up. And I think the Spurs are also going to make a real push for the playoffs. I think they're good enough to be a playoff team. I think they're even possibly good enough to be a contender. So I think for that reason, he will be top 5. And that's not even mentioning the stuff on defense. He should be the best defender on the planet. He should be the DPOY. So if on top of that, he's putting up 25 to 28 points per game, 5 assists, 12 rebounds, like getting like 3 blocks per game, good ass efficiency in the process, and the Spurs have a good record, yeah, that's a top 5 player. Now, number 3 and number 4 are Luka and SGA, and I really wrestled with who I actually think is the better player between these two. I went ahead and gave Shai the nod at number 3 just because he was the one who actually provably was able to win a championship as a number 1 option. But I also think Luka obviously got a far worse opponent to deal with in the finals and had a far worse team that also just completely abandoned him in terms of their ability to shoot the 3 ball at the very least. He was also dealing with lower body injuries in the finals. Like, there's a lot of different contexts there that give Luka excuse for that. However, it's still not what happened. So I'm going to give Shai the edge. That said, I think Luka's playmaking could be argued to be more valuable than Shai's defense that is a little overblown because he's in such an idealistic system for him to really very, very minimize his weaknesses and really emphasize his strengths. Not that I think Luka would be as good of a defender as Shai in the Thunder system, because that's not true. But I do think it helps SGA a lot, and some of his weaknesses on that end would be criticized a little bit more if he wasn't playing on one of the greatest defensive teams of all time. But I think it really comes down to, do you prefer defense or do you prefer the playmaking? Luka is a generational playmaker and Shai is a good defender. So in terms of who is better at what thing, Luka is better at the playmaking, but then it just becomes about what you value more. I think there is a better floor to Shai's game because Shai's defense will be consistent enough, and then his offense will also be more reliable because he's taking less like volatile deep 3-point shots like Luka does. I don't know. Shai's more consistent. Shai's the better defender. Luka's the better playmaker. And I also think on their best day anyways, the difference between the two as scorers is pretty negligible. They do it in fairly different ways, but at their best, they're both fucking unstoppable scoring machines and some of the best perimeter shot creators the game has ever seen. So I really don't think you can go wrong picking one or the other. And I also do think that Victor Wembanyama could possibly be good enough to even eclipse one of those two, if not both of them. But like I said, Luka and Shea could trade places. Number 2, I have Giannis, and I've seen a good amount of people put Shea at number 2, and I'm apparently the biggest Shea glazer in the world, but I still feel pretty confidently that Giannis is a better player than Shea, especially with the addition of the mid-range game that he had last year. Not that he's anywhere near SGA as a mid-range shooter, because SGA, when it's all said and done, as I have pointed out a few times now, will likely be on the mid-range Mount Rushmore in NBA history. But Giannis genuinely added that shot to his bag for real, and he is also a way better defensive player and more unstoppable as a scorer because he just has that freight train element to him. One thing that I would be a little critical for Shea in terms of what he has done in his last couple of years is that he's not as good getting to the rim in the playoffs as he is in the regular season. Like, okay, let me pull these numbers. In his last 3 years, so since he has been an all-star, although it's not fair to do that because he only made the playoffs the last 2 years. By the way, side note, it's crazy how many people were like, why aren't people more critical of Shea's lack of playoff success? And they said that shit last year like it wasn't his first time making the fucking playoffs, other than when he was on the Clippers and the Chris Paul Thunder. Yeah, in the regular season, 23% of his shots right at the basket. In the playoffs, that number goes down to 18%. So, I mean, it's not that dramatic of a difference, but it definitely feels like his slashing game is less impactful in that context. Giannis is getting to the rim no matter what. He might have to barrel through 3 people to get there, and it might be arguably vaguely dirty to do that. But at the end of the day, I'm just going on results here. And I think Giannis is better than Shea. I also think he's better than Luka, but I could see Shea and possibly even Luka being the better player. I think 2024, I consider Luka to be a better player than Giannis. That's pretty much the only time that has ever happened, and it feels weird. It feels like that season is so far from now because so much has happened with Luka since, but like, God, what a fucking year that was. He should have won the MVP, goddammit. Speaking of the guy who did win that MVP, at number 1, I have Nikola Jokic. While I have routinely argued against Jokic winning MVPs, argued against him winning it this year, argued against him winning it last year, and I argued against him winning it in like 2022 because I wanted Giannis to win it. Either way, however, he's the best player on the fucking planet. He is the best player in the world, and I don't particularly feel like it's close. I think his defense gets dramatically overblown because when you talk about a player as great as Jokic, you have to super harp on the nitpicky thing, but the reality is Denver has managed to be a stable and pretty damn good playoff defense throughout his entire time there, and that is while playing the most important defensive position and being the slowest footed guy and being the most mismatch on the perimeter player. Like, he has so much stuff that he is bad at on defense and is visibly really terrible when those moments happen that it kind of leads to people thinking he's just outright awful. But 9 times out of 10, Jokic is sitting in the right spot that he needs to, and it works out. And when you add on to it that I think it's him or Steph as the greatest offensive player of all time, like literally the most unstoppable offensive force, because you cannot stop him one-on-one because his hook shot / floater range shot is just truly incontainable in a one-on-one situation. So you want to bring 2 defenders over, but he's also probably the best passer since Magic Johnson. So like, he's going to cook you that way too. It's just been a matter of if his teammates will finish the fucking shot or not. But yeah, that is my top 10 going into the year, my prediction. Let me know what you think the top 10 players in the NBA will be this upcoming season. Let me know if there's a player who I underrated in this list. I will run through it one more time. Again, this is my projected top 10 players for the 2025-26 season. Number 1, Jokic. Then Giannis at 2, Shea at 3, Luka at 4, Victor Wembanyama. I almost said Victor Oladipo. Sad. Victor Wembanyama at 5, Devin Booker at 6, Jalen Brunson at 7, Anthony Edwards at 8, Kevin Durant at 9, and Stephen Curry at 10. Honorable mentions to Joel Embiid, Zion, Donovan Mitchell, Paulo Banchero, Cade Cunningham, Anthony Davis, and Ja Morant. Thank you so much for watching. Sorry that this is maybe a little bit of a filler video, but you know what it is. This is the off season. So yeah, thank you for watching and goodbye.